When someone utters the words horror game, for many gamers the first thing that comes to their mind is either a picture of the Silent Hill 2 box cover or a picture of Pyramid Head with a six-pack. Estefando me está podrido. And that isn't really something to be surprised about, because Silent Hill 2 is regarded as one of the best, if not the best, horror game of all time. Terrifying atmosphere, well-written characters, unnerving mystery, and a perfect story. Perfectly delivered as well. And this love for the game, combined with Konami's track record of regurgitated diarrhea of Silent Hill content over the last 20 years, were the reason why the announcement of a Silent Hill 2 remake was met at the very best with skepticism, and at the very worst with pure, unadulterated hate. But time has now passed, and at the time of writing this video, the game has been out for nearly 20 days. And we gotta say that the general consensus is pretty clear. The game is pretty fucking good. And since the game is mostly perceived as a good product, a group of gamers are trying to pick it apart and say it's bad for the most trivial shit imaginable, while another group of gamers are taking these claims to the edge of sanity and making the most loony remarks you'll ever see.
It's only a game.
So, of course we're going to take a look at that. But before diving deep into the abyss of fecal matter, we'll do a small review of the game to see how good it really is, and if it actually lives up to the legend of the original one. Needless to say, this video will have major spoilers. Consider this your spoiler warning. Silencio Gil dos, más giles que nunca. The story is about James Sunderland, a man ridden with a deep depression over the passing of his late wife Mary, who receives a letter from her telling him that she's waiting for him in their special place in the town of Silent Hill, a place where they once had a hot vacation. Driven by the hopes of once again seeing his better half, James goes to Silent Hill and keeps getting deeper and deeper into the town despite the horrific monsters and impossible landscapes that start haunting him inside the deep fog. The gameplay in Silent Hill 2 Remake is the classic survival horror. You run around different areas in search of resources and items that will help you progress through the game, be it in the form of resources, key items, or weapons. There are a total of 5 different weapons in the game, 6 if you count the special weapon, and the first one you obtain in the game is a melee one.
I'm gonna fuck you up.
The melee attack button will have James swinging like a crackhead in the direction of the nearest enemy in your field of view, having some sort of auto-lock on, ensuring you land them about 99% of the time. Once the enemy is down, you can finish them with a final hit, or you can go ham for as long as you want. However, mindlessly mashing like a rabid chimpanzee will get you punished, as enemies can counterattack you mid-combo, and this, we believe, is a really great addition to prevent the game from being a mash fest. To dodge these counterattacks, James can perform a sidestep with the dodge button, a new mechanic unique to the remake. This sidestep will give James a ton of invincibility frames, so timing them perfectly is not exactly a Mensa-level task, but it works best if you actually use it properly. Once you finally get a hold of a gun, fighting monsters is exactly like the Resident Evil 2 remake. You aim and you shoot. It doesn't get any simpler than that. The combat remains solid enough, and at no point we felt it getting stale, even though you'll be fighting the same 4 monsters during most of the game. During the town portion of the early game, you only have access to the wooden plank while you explore a section of the town in search of items and clues to solve a main puzzle or puzzles, which is a gameplay cycle that you'll be repeating for the remainder of your playthrough. Luckily, each area is pretty unique and aesthetically interesting, camouflaging this repetitive aspect just enough so it doesn't get boring or tedious. And thorough exploration is encouraged and rewarded with items that'll prevent you from getting brutalized, such as ammunition and healing items, as well as memos that serve as game lore. Oftentimes, though, picking up items from drawers can be a daunting task, as the prompt to pick them up won't trigger unless you're in a very specific spot.
This is bullshit!
And this can cause some hair to be lost, but it grows back once you take a look at the healing items in this game. I wouldn't recommend consuming anything you find in this town, but I guess that pales in comparison to injecting this thing into your system, as it would probably give you every STD known to man. Once you're done with the town section, you'll enter the game's first major dungeon. It is here where we meet 2 of the major characters in the game, and meet again another one that we haven't previously mentioned because Well, I forgot. Angela, a teen looking for her mother. Eddie, an obese man suspiciously resembling a certain Nickelodeon producer who ran away into Silent Hill. And Laura, a little girl who greets you by stepping on your girlfriend. We'll talk about these characters a bit more in depth later, as for now I'd like to focus on one of the most important gameplay aspects of the new area, and of Silent Hill 2 Remake as well. It's puzzles. Puzzles have always been a major aspect of every Silent Hill game, being written just well enough to require some out-of-the-box thinking or pattern recognition to be solved properly. You also had higher puzzle difficulties in Silent Hill 2 and 3, in case you were in search of a more cerebral experience. For our first playthrough, we decided to play the game on the default puzzle difficulty to see what kind of problem-solving skills the developers think the average gamer has. And to be fair, it wasn't very satisfying. Most, if not all, of the puzzles in the game are disappointingly easy to solve and only become a problem if you approach them as if they were complex, which in itself is a problem. For example, there is a puzzle in the hospital that involves placing 3 patient tags on a hand in a certain order. Next to the hand, there's a recorder with a recording of what can presumably be the hospital's director talking about curing his patients, as well as 3 different patient records on the desk to the right. We first thought that we needed to pay attention to both the recording and the patient records to solve the puzzle, so we tried to apply all kinds of twisted logic to it, but it turns out that the solution was a lot stupider than that. You simply had to match the dirt stains on the tags with the stains on the hand. Just wow. It was at this point where we finally learned that the puzzles were all going to be pretty dumbed down, a lesson that we should have learned much earlier with all the super silly puzzles we were presented up to then. But screw us for remaining hopeful, I guess. Not only are the puzzles toned down, but key items that in the normal game used to be very far from their intended use zone are now moved just a few inches from the area where you have to use them. The best example of this being the juice pack in the Woodside Apartments. In the original game, the juice pack is in a hallway on the first floor and you have to throw it inside a garbage disposal hole on the second floor, with the game giving a very vague hint that this is what you had to do. In the remake, however, we vividly remember our reaction when we found it. Ah, cool. Well, that's cool, but where do I head to? Oh, for fuck's! This happens multiple times throughout the game, and it leaves us wondering why they even included these items in the first place. It doesn't make the task any more complex if you have to plug in the toaster before toasting the bread that's next to the toaster. It just feels like filler for the sake of filler. But despite the puzzles not being very poggers, the level design of each location almost makes this a non-issue, with gorgeously detailed and terrifying environments that pretty much tell a story as well, accompanied by a masterfully crafted soundtrack. Courtesy of the great Akira Yamaoka, every environment and area in the game is very well done and doesn't disappoint at all in their disturbing imagery and atmosphere, always finding something new to pog about in all of the game's locations, with a special mention to the glimpse of the past thingies that have you reacting all like that one DiCaprio scene. Speaking of the locations, each level usually has you running around a normal version of any area you're in, only to throw you into a more twisted and severely more threatening version of the same place. A liberty that this game likes to take way more than the original 2001 game. This other world, for a lack of a better word, bears a striking resemblance to the one used in the first and the third game. A most interesting artistic decision, considering that the nightmare segments of the original Silent Hill 2 felt much more abandoned and dilapidated in contrast to the more hellish, industrial nightmare sections of the aforementioned games. It worked better in the original as it kind of represented James's deteriorating mental state as he progressed through the town, whereas here it feels like they just used what they think Silent Hill fans are used to seeing, since this was done to every area in the game, even when the normal counterparts are already pretty lengthy. Depending on your taste, the game can get a tad too long, but more content is always a good thing, storytelling as long as it stays fresh. And oh boy, the game sure delivers on that aspect. The resemblances don't just end there, as the monsters in the nightmare segments tend to be a stronger version of the regular ones, the same way Silent Hill 1 treated their monsters. I mean, just look at that little wormy boy. And since we're talking about the monsters, let's talk about what's probably the most awesome change they made with the remake: the boss fights.
Hi.
Except for a specific mini-boss in the Lakeview Hotel, the remake has pretty much the same boss fights as the original game, but amped to the power of 100 kajillion. What used to be very monotonous move-and-shoot goofy R fights are now adrenaline-pumping sequences where both the boss and your environments constantly change in an ass-tearing battle to decide whose rectum will remain intact. The difficulty of the fights is not brutally exaggerated nor a snooze fest, and the pacing of each fight makes it easy to tell if you're actually doing the right thing and not simply wasting bullets like a drunken Texan. The highlight of these boss fights has to be the abstract daddy boss fight located in the labyrinth. This boss fight was a masterpiece in tension, atmosphere, and storytelling, far surpassing the original one, which was pretty stupid to be honest. And of course, if we're going to talk about the game's bosses, we cannot avoid talking about the most important creature in the whole game. DeviantArt's mask. Pyramid Head. Probably the most iconic monster in the whole series, this guy will stalk you throughout the whole game and cannot be unalived. He also hits like a drunken stepdad and is placed in locations that make navigation pretty difficult. However, there is more to this guy than meets the eye. And for that, we gotta continue talking about the story. We explained the premise, but these hills are all but silent, my dude. Like we said before, Silent Hill is about a man who received a letter from his deceased wife telling him to look for her in their special place.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary, my wife's name. It's ridiculous. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago. So then why am I looking for her? Our special place. What could she mean?
Only issue is that this is a semi-sentient town that has the power of manifesting part of the psyche and dreams of people riddled with traumatic guilt, as well as being able to shift reality into a hemorrhoidic mess around said people. Most of what James sees throughout his journey was tailor-made for him and manifested by the town, as the dude is carrying the guilt of having murdered his terminally ill wife by suffocating her with a pillow after he no longer could bear taking care of her, nor seeing her in such a deteriorating state.
I can't forgive myself for what I've done.
The event was so traumatic that James actually developed amnesia and believes that his wife actually died of the disease 3 years ago, when in reality he played a bit too rough with her no more than a couple of weeks ago, evidenced by a letter left to Laura by his late wife Mary.
Happy 8th birthday, Laura. Your friend, Mary.
Laura, how old are you?
I turned 8 last week.
That means Mary couldn't have died 3 years ago.
While the letter that James received from Mary at the beginning of the game never actually existed, it was simply the town's way of calling him. If you're wondering about Laura, she's also in town looking for Mary.
Besides, I need your help finding Mary. She's here, isn't she?
As she misinterpreted Mary's letter for her, a real physical letter, and believes that Mary physically went to her special place in Silent Hill and is simply there waiting for her.
My dearest Laura, I'm leaving this letter with Rachel to give to you after I'm gone. I'm far away now, in a quiet, beautiful place.
Being completely innocent, sees nothing in Silent Hill, and it looks like a normal town for her.
Let go!
Sorry, Laura, but I can't let you just run around this place. You might get hurt.
Hurt by what?
Look, just
She got to town hitching a ride with Eddie Dombrowski, as seen in the intro cinematic of the original game. Speaking of Eddie, he's a chonky boy who suffered a life of bullying and cruelty due to liking Big Macs a little bit too much. The dude at some point finally snapped and shot and murdered a dog, also shooting someone in the leg before running away to Silent Hill.
Do you know what it does to you, James? When you're hated, picked on, spit on? Just because of the way you look? Yeah, I ran away after I killed that dog. But you know what? It was fun! It tried to chew its own guts up. Finally died all curled up in a ball. Then he came after me. I shot him too, right in the leg. He cried more than the dog.
What we don't understand is why Bloober Team decided to make Eddie so bloody disgusting.
Oh, hell no.
I mean, in the original game, the dude is big and all, but he doesn't look like he would vore you in an alleyway. Not only his physical appearance was changed, but his violent demeanors were introduced early in the theater scene as opposed to the prison scene.
You coming?
Now you want me to come with you?
Regardless, his fate is the same as in the original game. He descends into madness after the town forcibly has him suffer constant bullying from tiny Jameses.
Well, what's it look like I'm doing? You fat, disgusting piece of shit, you make me sick! You gonna cry, fat ass? You gonna run to your mama? Waste of skin, why don't you just kill yourself? Maybe he was right. Maybe I am nothing but a fat, disgusting piece of shit. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And a corpse can't laugh!
Up until he can't take it anymore and decides to 1v1 you inside a freezer. Then James caps him dead and that's it. We'll miss you, buddy. What's funny is that Eddie understood why he was called to town way before James did, even insinuating that he knows that James is also a murderer.
Don't get all holy on me, James. This town called you too. Yeah, you and me are the same. We're not like other people, don't you know that?
Someone who is also a murderer is Angela, a teenage girl who suffered a life of SA from his father until she could no longer take it anymore and offed the guy by playfully pinching him with a kitchen knife. She presumably also murdered her brother, who used to turn a blind eye to the SA, and is also looking for her mother in Silent Hill, possibly to get her triple kill.
I'm looking for my my mother. It's been so long since I've seen her. I thought my father and brother were here, but I can't find them either.
The aforementioned abstract daddy fight has us fighting a monster that's specific to Angela, a monster that clearly resembles some very nasty stuff going under some sheets. Angela exhibits unaliving tendencies throughout the game, even asking us to hold a kitchen knife for her.
Will you hold it for me?
Sure. No problem.
If I kept it, I'm not sure what I might do.
In the end, she sadly succumbs to the town and ends walking into a fiery staircase. These three characters are all going through their own personal hell in Silent Hill, with the nightmares sometimes overlapping with each other, as well as themselves playing a part in each other's punishment. However, out of all the characters we've talked about now, we still haven't mentioned the most important one, who is also tied to the monster that prompted us to talk about the story.
Voice, you could be.
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
James meets Maria in the Rosewater Park and is immediately dumbfounded on how she's pretty much a copy-paste of his late wife.
I can't believe it. Your face, your voice, you could be.
My name is
John C.
She follows James through a small portion of the game in a sort of escort mission all the way from the park to the hospital, where she is murdered by Pyramid Head.
Ouchie.
And then she shows up again in the labyrinth, only to be found dead minutes later. And then kicking the bucket once more in front of James before the second-to-last boss fight. This is because Maria is an imperfect recreation of Mary made by the town for James. She's what James sexually wanted from Mary and could not receive due to her illness. Her likeness to Mary doesn't end there though, as Maria's reason for being unalived several times throughout the game by Pyramid Head is to make James remember his crime, and this is the reason why Pyramid Head can't be damaged. Pyramid Head is James, while both Maria and most of the monsters, who all have female features, represent Mary.
If I see this, I'm fucking it. No condom, raw dog, I'm fucking the shit out this bitch!
And the constant unaliving of these creatures is simply mimicking James placing his wife on an oxygen diet over and over. Pyramid Head was also given slightly bigger screen time in the remake, and we believe that was a nice addition, as this screen time is well-paced and in areas where it makes most sense, mostly the labyrinth, which seems to be the creature's hideout, as weird as that sounds. Towards the end of the game, we can see that there are 2 Pyramid Head creatures instead of 1. And you want to know why this is? Well, the first was because James offed Mary. The second one is because James also offed Eddie. In this second-to-last boss fight, James finally comes to terms with what he did, so he doesn't need the creature to punish him anymore.
I know what you are. I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. I don't need you anymore. I'm ready.
And after a short boss fight, both monsters do this. ¿Qué quieren decir con esto? The final boss of the game is Maria herself, or Mary, depending on the ending you get, but the boss fight plays the same either way, and it's very good. Not as good as the Abstract Daddy, but still very good. After the final boss, you can get one of the 8 endings in the game, and the one you get will depend on your actions during your playthrough. We're not going to go into detail about the conditions for each ending, but we will inform you that we got the ending where James ends his lifetime subscription to living.
Just can't go on without you.
Just because we checked Angela's knife a couple of times. Overall, the remaking of the story of a man venturing into the depths of a reality-warping nightmare town in search for his wife was delivered in a way that will objectively leave newcomers and fans of the franchise pretty satisfied. The game is just long enough with well-placed changes here and there to keep the experience fresh and tense all the way from beginning to end. It's extremely replayable too, thanks to its 8 endings and achievement hunting, with enough content to keep you entertained for many playthroughs to come. Sadly though, the vitriol for the title did not dissipate even after the game's release. Not because the game is bad, but because some people find more enjoyment in arguing than playing the game. Look, we were the first in line to roll our eyes at the announcement back in 2022 when we saw those goofy screenshots of James looking like a sad puppy. We don't like Konami. We knew what they did with previous titles in the franchise, and we were horrified at the thought of what they could do to one of the most beloved titles. We maintained our skepticism even during the first part of the early game, when we came to a point where we had to accept that the game was actually well made. And since the game is actually good, gamers argue about the most trivial shit you could ever imagine: the character's appearance. If we had to give our personal opinion, we'd say that the characters look, well, fine. Even the devs acknowledged that the models were a little iffy in the pre-release footage and corrected them a bit before release. They're not stellar nor hideously designed. They're good enough for the game to not distract you from the story, except for Dan, though. Someone at the dev team clearly disliked him. And to be fair, Bloober Team clearly deviated a bit from what they had in mind for Angela in the concept art, and maybe Maria doesn't look as charming as in the original game, but it's not really that important. However, the internet will always be internet, so memes and exaggerations about the characters will be made by people who just want to have a laugh. You can't possibly take a post like this seriously, and if you do, I'd suggest you find some real problems to worry about, and this goes for both groups of extremists. It is equally idiotic to believe that someone wants Angela to be Guna bait just because they mildly criticized their design than to believe the game has a woke agenda to push just because the character designs were changed a bit. We honestly fail to see what these changes for modern audiences were after playing the whole game. I feel like the game is just fine and people are simply making a fuzz, either for memes or because they have nothing better to do. Or maybe because they just wanted the game to be bad and they're now disappointed that it isn't. If those changes were supposed to be the aspect of some of these characters, then okay, I guess. It's not really a big deal, and molding on the internet about it is just plain idiotic. We wanted to personally thank you if you stuck to the end of this video. If this is your first time on the channel, you should know that we usually don't make content from media other than Elden Ring, but we've trying to experiment with topics and stuff we're passionate about. So if you liked this video, consider checking these other videos for more fun essays about the stuff we love. We'll probably address more fun stuff in the future. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this little review. And we'll see each other again, Little Health Drinks. Bye-bye.